Okay, if we're really serious about hitting those global climate targets, the ones from Coti 21, then India's energy transition is, well, it's maybe the most critical conversation we need to be having.
Absolutely. For a huge economy growing as fast as India's, moving entirely off fossil fuels, I mean, it looks like a massive challenge.
Yeah, it really does. It brings up all these big questions: affordability, reliability, even national security. So, can India actually pull off a 100% renewable energy system? And can they do it without, breaking the bank or causing blackouts? Today, we're diving deep into a really detailed study that tackles exactly that. We're looking closely at the source: the role of storage technologies and energy transition pathways towards achieving a fully sustainable energy system for India.
Right. Our job here is basically to unpack what this uh, pretty complex academic work found. This study modeled a full energy transition for India, going right out to 2050.
Yeah.
And they used an hourly optimization model. Importantly, it's not just about electricity. They included things like water desalination and industrial gas demand, too.
And the headline finding, the thing you really need to remember from this, is that getting to 100% renewables isn't just possible technically. According to their model, the final system is actually cheaper than sticking with India's current setup, which is mostly fossil fuels. Quite surprising, really.
Yeah, it is. And to see how they reached that pretty optimistic conclusion, we need to look at their method. The core is this LUT energy system transition modeling tool. It's basically a linear optimization model. Think of it like treating India's whole energy system as one big math problem. Its main goal, working in 5-year steps up to 2050, is just to find the cheapest way to run the energy system each year, minimize the total annual cost.
Okay, but it wasn't a free-for-all, right? They put in some serious real-world limits that must have made finding that cheapest path pretty tricky.
Exactly. That's where it gets interesting. They built in hurdles. First, to stop things getting chaotic, renewable energy capacity couldn't grow more than 20% in any 5-year period. That forces a more, realistic gradual build out over decades.
Sounds.
And second, and this is key for the fully sustainable part, no new nuclear, coal, or oil power plants allowed after 2015.
Whoa, hang on. Let's pause there. No new nuclear after 2015. I mean, India has some pretty big plans for new nuclear right now, politically speaking. Isn't that a bit unrealistic for a model looking at the future? How do they justify taking that option completely off the table?
They justify it economically. The study is laser focused on the least cost outcome. They looked at the projected costs of new nuclear and also new coal with carbon capture CCS, and their numbers showed these are just way more expensive than the renewable options. So the model, aiming for the lowest cost, simply doesn't choose them. It's really an economic constraint presented as a sustainability one. The math just says they aren't needed for the cheapest path.
Interesting. So the model naturally favors renewables because they end up being the cheapest tech. Okay, so they ran two versions: the power scenario, just electricity, and the integrated scenario, which added those other things like industrial gas. Let's talk the levelized cost of electricity, LCOE. That's the real measure of affordability.
Yeah, LCOE really
Right.
tells the story of the transition. In the power scenario, just electricity, the LCOE started at 58 US dollars per megawatt hour back in 2015. By 2050, the model gets that down to $52 per mega UH.
A drop.
Yeah, a noticeable drop. And if you look at the integrated scenario, where you add those other demands, which gives the system more flexibility, the cost gets even lower, down to $46 per mega UH by 2050. That's a big long-term saving.
But like you mentioned, the cost doesn't just fall smoothly. There's an initial hit, isn't there? That LCOE actually goes up until 2025. Is that the price of switching? What does that mean practically?
That's exactly right. It's the cost of, well, inertia, maybe. The LCOE does rise for about 10 years, until 2025. That's because, in the short term, the cheapest way to meet India's growing demand is to keep using the existing coal plants. Even in 2025, coal is still providing something like 40% of the power, and using it means paying for fuel and, crucially, dealing with rising CO2 emission costs. The LCOE only really starts to fall significantly after 2025. That's when the cheaper solar PV and battery capacity really starts to scale up and push out that expensive coal generation.
Okay, so this is where we see the future shape of India's energy system taking form. This study points very clearly to one main pairing: solar PV and battery storage. That's the new low-cost backbone.
Absolutely. The scale is just huge. By 2050, in the power scenario, solar PV is the clear winner. You've got single-axis tracking PV making up 59% of all installed capacity, and then rooftop solar, what they call prosumers, adds another 29%.
Wow.
Yeah, it's overwhelmingly solar.
Okay, now the storage part. Because solar needs storage to work 2047. How does the role of storage change over time? It seems like it shifts from daily balancing to handling whole seasons.
It's definitely a staged evolution. In the early years, say up to 2020, the existing pumped hydro storage PHS is the cheapest option because, well, it's already there. But once renewables provide more than half the power, which happens after 2025 in the model, batteries become really cost-effective. They provide that crucial day-to-day flexibility. They turn out to be cheaper to build and run than keeping old thermal plants spinning just for backup.
And that leads to some pretty massive numbers for batteries. How much of the actual demand is met by batteries in this 2050 scenario?
It's enormous. By 2050, the electricity output from batteries in the power scenario is 2596 terawatt hours.
2596 TWH. How big is that?
Okay, put it this way. 2596 TWH is roughly the total amount of electricity the entire European Union uses in a year right now.
Wow.
So batteries are covering something like 42% of India's total electricity demand by then. That means they're not just backup, they're fundamental grid infrastructure.
Right. But even a battery system that big mostly solves the daily issue charge during the day, use it at night. When you get close to 100% renewables, you need something more, right? Something to cover weeks or even months if solar output drops, like during the monsoon. You need seasonal storage.
Correct. Once the renewable share gets over 80%, which happens around 2045 in the model, that's when long-term gas storage really takes over in terms of installed capacity. And this capacity is mostly built using power to gas, or PTG.
Okay, for listeners maybe not totally up on utility storage tech, what exactly is power to gas and why that instead of just, building even more batteries?
Good question. Think of batteries like buckets, great for carrying energy for a day. Power to gas, PTG, that's like building a huge reservoir for the whole season. How it works is you take excess electricity, usually solar power that would otherwise be curtailed or wasted, and you use it to run an electrolyzer. That makes hydrogen. You can then store the hydrogen, maybe convert it to synthetic methane, which is easier to handle. This gas can be stored in massive amounts, like in underground caverns, for months. Then, when you need the power back, you burn the gas in really efficient turbines, combined cycle gas turbines, or CCGTs, YPTG, because it's much, much cheaper to store huge amounts of energy for long periods as gas than it is to build enough batteries to do the same job. The cost scales much better for long duration.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about the big reliability test for India. The monsoon, June to September generally. Solar output drops significantly. So how does this modeled system keep the lights on? How does it guarantee power during those cloudy months when its main energy source is weaker?
Right, this is where you see how all the pieces fit together, batteries, gas storage, and the grid. It's quite elegant, actually. During the monsoon, batteries obviously get less charge from the sun, so they're used less. Their total output drops to about 85% of what it is in non-monsoon times.
So something has to fill that gap.
Exactly, and that's where the long-term storage, the gas storage, really steps up. Gas storage discharge burning that stored gas in the CCGTs increases by nearly 10%. This power is used specifically to cover nighttime demand and those periods with really low solar output. The gas storage acts like the system's insurance policy against the bad weather season.
And what about just moving power around? The transmission grid must play a big part too, right? Shifting power from sunny areas to cloudy ones.
A critical role. The grid moves energy in space rather than time, which reduces how much storage you need locally. The study found grid use goes up quite a bit during the monsoon. It handles about 6.2% of total power demand then, compared to just 4.9% outside the monsoon. So, yeah, having strong transmission lines connecting different regions is absolutely vital for keeping things stable during those seasonal dips.
The study also mentions a really specific operational trick that ties batteries and gas storage together. Synchronizing battery discharge with power to gas charging. Can you explain that? It sounds like the daily storage system is actually feeding the long-term seasonal storage.
That's precisely it. And it's a key part of the least cost strategy because it stops energy being wasted. Think about early summer or peak summer days. Lots of sun, maybe demand isn't super high yet. The batteries get fully charged quite early. Now, the battery's like a funnel. If it's full, what do you do with the extra solar power? Instead of just throwing it away, curtailing it, the system directs the discharge from the already full battery into the power-to-gas process.
Ah, okay. So instead of curtailing solar or needing even more batteries just to soak up a temporary midday surplus, the daily battery cycle basically tops up the seasonal gas tank.
Exactly. This synchronized flow is vital for keeping costs down. If the batteries didn't discharge into the PDG system like this, then the next day, Some solar generation would have to be curtailed because the batteries would still be too full from the day before. There'd be nowhere for the energy to go. By 2050, the amount of electricity transferred this way from battery discharge to PT charging is about 211 TWh.
That sounds like a lot.
It is, but it's only about 3.4% of India's total electricity demand. But it's a critical 3.4% because it prevents waste across the whole system and helps achieve that lowest cost.
That really highlights that this isn't just about installing hardware, it's about smart, integrated operation to manage these complex energy flows.
It really shows that getting to 100% renewables is an engineering challenge, but a solvable one. It requires intelligent integration. We have a pathway here that seems technically sound. Solar PV as the energy base, batteries handling the daily swings, and then gas storage via PTG, plus a strong grid, managing the seasonal and regional balancing. And the end goal is full decarbonization by 2050, zero annual CO2 emissions from the energy system.
I think, for you listening, maybe the most powerful point here is the economic one. This study really builds a strong case that renewables are just cheaper. That final levelized cost of electricity, somewhere between $46 and $52 per MWH for a fully sustainable system, is dramatically lower than the alternatives.
Yeah, when people argue for keeping conventional options, they're often talking about paths that just look more expensive based on these numbers. The study estimated new nuclear power would cost around $112 per MWH. New coal, even with carbon capture technology, was even higher at $126 per MWH.
So this suggests renewables aren't just the green choice, they're the smart money choice. Lower risk, lowest cost. You avoid the long-term headaches of nuclear waste or the geopolitical risks tied to importing fossil fuels. It kind of flips the whole traditional energy security argument around. Well, that was our deep dive into the complex but surprisingly affordable future outlined in the role of storage technologies in energy transition pathways towards achieving a fully sustainable energy system for India. Oh, we hope you feel a bit more informed about how India might just manage this huge energy shift, potentially leading the way.